Good morning, gang, or afternoon, I suppose, where you're joining us from. Welcome and thank you for attending this service management webinar. More specifically, let's talk about creating better customer experiences and generating more work using Spectrum Service Management. So today we'll focus on the service side of the house, and specifically we'll take a look at a handful of things from generating contracts, maybe proposed contracts, executed contracts from a service management perspective. We'll talk about scheduling preventive maintenance visits. You can do those months in advance, and you can even assign who's going to do the work well in advance of that site visit happening. We'll take a look at how we can easily create work orders a handful of different ways, either off of our scheduled maintenance visits or from inbound, let's say phone calls that we get. We'll take a look at easy ways to log those inbound service requests. We can talk about billing per contract terms, generating invoices automatically, and then also how to generate finished work tickets out in the field when the work is completed. And we can talk about reviewing our customer service history. We'll look at dispatching technicians and how to get your work scheduled to the proper technician. And then we'll talk about tracking site equipment and warranty information, service coverage. Is there a manufacturer's warranty in place that perhaps you don't want to bill your customer for example? Those are some of the topics that we'll cover. We'll also take a look at some of our field resources, so data collection from the field. There's a couple of options. We also have an exciting partnership with a company called Field Connect that allows us even greater resources out in the field. So we'll discuss what can you capture once the guy hits the job site. So we'll kind of do both sides of the equation. We'll do the office side of things, managing our contracts, creating our billings. We'll look at dispatching the work, and then we'll go out in the field and show you the resources available for capturing information as the work is performed out on the service site. So that's what we can look forward to today. I will hop us on over into Spectrum. Oh, by the way, my name's Heather Smith. You're listening to Heather this morning, so thank you for joining. I will cruise on over to Spectrum here, and we will dig right into it. I think the place that it makes sense to begin is with the concept of contract management. You're going to have a couple different types of service calls, presumably. You're going to have the stuff that's covered as part of a maintenance agreement or a service contract, and then you're going to have the emergent type calls, the stuff that comes up ad hoc. They pick up the phone, they say, such and such broke, come and fix it. So we'll look at how you can manage both sides of those service requests, the scheduled stuff and the unscheduled stuff. So where I usually like to begin, we've got a dashboard here. This is how you can set up your world to be kind of filled with the stuff that's going to be most important to you. You can use this to keep tabs on things like this is routed to you, time cards perhaps that have come in from those service technicians in the field that may need to be approved, workflow assignments. Maybe we've got purchasing requests that are coming in, maybe from our technicians out there on the job site. All of those are things that you can drive to your dashboard. Today am going to take us right into the good stuff, though. I'm going to dig us into service contracts and how we set those up. We'll walk through the information stored on the contract or the maintenance agreement, and then we'll create some work orders. We'll create some bills. We can chat renewal management a little as well. So I've taken us into our log of service contracts here, and this is going to be both my proposed contracts, the stuff where I've decided to issue a proposal, see if the customer decides to go ahead and sign it, as well as the active contracts. This is a big list. I can decide to choose what sorts of statuses I want to see. I can even say, show me expired proposals, inactive contracts. I've got toggles and options here. Also, if you've got a large volume of contracts, you may want to search to find the ones you're looking for by things like the site or the customer. I happen to have a lot of contracts for the library system set up here, so I can search for that particular site or customer and it'll find me matches. Let's just grab an existing contract here and talk about the information we're storing on the contract. So I'm going to open this one up. So from managing our contracts, I have a contract here. It's in place through the end of this month. I can establish the start and end dates of the contract. If I've got different types of contracts, I can establish different types. Perhaps you've got stuff that's going to cover full maintenance. Maybe you've got more limited contracts that's just going to be a biannual inspection. Maybe you've got stuff that you're going to bill T&M and you want to set up unique types of contracts for that. up to you. Any list you see here really as we cruise through the system is totally configurable. So you'll see options that I've got in this sort of demo environment, but very configurable to suit the needs of the type of work that you and your company do. So I've got a contract start and end date. I've got a type of contract. When I generate work orders off of this particular contract, when I actually create the visits, I've got my visit schedule. I'm going to send the guys out there. When I'm actually generating the tickets or the visits or the work orders, I might choose to have certain types of work orders created off of this contract. You're going to have different customers where you offer different pricing levels. I may offer preferred pricing to certain customers. I may have different pricing levels, both for labor and materials, for perhaps new customers. You can establish different pricing levels for your labor, for your materials, and then as well, specific markups that could be unique to a particular contract. So if you're going to mark up the parts that you use by a particular percentage for a particular contract, you can establish that. If I'm creating a proposal, it's as easy as ticking this box and indicating how long I'm going to honor the proposal. So when am I issuing the proposal? How long is it going to be good for? When does it expire? Then I also have a profit summary on my contract, and we want to give this to you front and center so that as soon as you open up a contract, you have good visibility on what have you earned, what sort of extra work may have gone into this particular contract from a work order standpoint, perhaps additional T&M work, and what's your total revenue, what's your cost, what's your profitability on the contract. Currently, I'm running pretty lean and mean here. We've got good profit on that. It doesn't cost me much to do my work. So this is just the high-level front and center contract setup. I also have, if we're talking about document imaging here, the opportunity to attach documents to this contract. So when my customer sends back the signed agreement, I can attach that in here. Just to chat about how easy this is. If there's something that I want to add to my contract, I can simply drag that document into this imaging panel and drop it off. And now that is attached to my contract. So drag and drop documentation here. Now those documents are stored on this particular contract for the life of the contract. I've got on this side of the screen what I call an info bar. And what this is doing is it's actually allowing me access to a host of other information, both about this particular contract we're looking at right here, as well as what's going on peripherally at the site where the contract it covers, and then as well as the customer. So if I want to know what's happening specifically at this library where I'm enacting a contract with this particular library location, I have access to that information here, more details about the site. I've also got access to information about my customer. So from here, if this is my main properties of the contract, if I take one tick down this info bar here, I have more details about the equipment that is specifically covered by this maintenance contract. So I've got a handful of equipment covered by this contract. If I choose to add additional equipment, if it turns out there's something else that's installed on site that's going to be covered by this agreement, I have the opportunity to browse through all of my site equipment and decide which items are going to be covered by this contract. I also have components to each of these. So you can think of these equipment items really as entire systems, and then the components of that system are broken down here. So this particular train split system has a chiller system and a coil system and some other components. And these I can see in greater detail as well. So there may be warranty information that covers unique components of the system when we're talking about establishing, warrantor billing or maintenance agreements that cover not only what your customer is going to pay, but also perhaps that a manufacturer might be billed for as part of a visit. You can establish that here. So I've got my site equipment or systems, and then the components broken down in here, each with their opportunity for unique warranty information. And then I can remove any of these as well. I can edit them. Let's say we swap out a system or a piece of equipment on site and replace it with something else. I have the opportunity to remove items from the contract, and then I can actually even add new site equipment altogether. So I install something new. It's going to be covered by the same maintenance agreement. I can add equipment to the site from here as well. So this establishes what's covered by this contract. I can also set up unique billing rates, labor billing rates for this particular contract if I want as well. So if I've negotiated labor pricing unique to this maintenance agreement, that information lives in here. And then in the billing section, I'm establishing when am I going to send my customer invoices for this contract. I can establish the total amount of the contract, as well as when the billings are going to start, how many contract billings I'm going to issue, I can also identify along what basis I'm going to recognize my revenue. So we give you choices here in terms of, are we going to recognize the revenue as it's billed? Is there going to be a straight line calculation method? Do I want to base my revenue recognition off of my visit dates or when I send my text out there, or along some other line, and we let you establish your own user-defined schedule for recognizing revenue? Then I have a tool to actually go through a routine to run in order to actually post the earned revenue as well. So I can establish along what basis I'm going to earn the revenue, and also how am I going to bill. So I can establish when I'm going to bill and how much I'm going to bill on this contract. I can also see an earned revenue history up here as well. And if for some reason this particular contract needs to send its invoices to an alternate billing address, they have the opportunity to do that. This is where I'm setting up, what am I going to bill, what's the total contract amount, how often and when am I going to invoice them. And then uniquely from that, or separately from that, I've got the concept of my visit schedule. So when am I going to send my technicians out to do the work? And as part of this visit schedule, I'm establishing tasks that will be performed on the individual pieces of equipment. So we'll say that in this case, I'm going to send somebody out to inspect this particular system, and as part of this inspection, I'm going to perform a handful of tasks on these pieces of equipment. I'm going to do a filter change, I'm going to check some pulleys. Each of these tasks have their own unique pricing associated with them. This can be a flat rate task, this can be build C&M. I can have parts lists, instructions, unique inventory items or pieces of stock parts or supplies that I'm going to use on here. So I can establish the details of the visit. I can add visit notes in here as well. So if my technician is going to need additional information about what he's being sent to go do, I have the opportunity to add notes. So I'm going to send the guy out in October to inspect the system. Here are the tasks he's going to perform on these individual pieces of equipment. And if I want more information about the tasks I'm sending them to do, the opportunity to review that here. I can have an unlimited number of tasks associated with all of the site equipment on here that I need for any given visit. And then if we want, we can copy these visits as well. So if I'm going to send somebody to do something in November, and they're going to go do that same thing, let's say in February, I can increment those visits, and it's just going to copy all of the information in terms of the tasks and what they're going to be performing and set a new scheduled date on here. These scheduled dates can be used when I'm generating my work tickets or my work orders off of this schedule to automatically even default the scheduled technician or the preferred technician in there as well. And then there's probably going to be notes or verbiage that needs to be attached to the contract. So perhaps there are exceptions, exclusions, scope build out that you'd like to do as part of the contract. I can add notes. All of these topics are configurable and defined by you as the user to decide what sorts of notes would you like to add to the contract. And then we've got user-defined opportunities as well. So if there are pieces of information that you would like to store on the contract, we didn't necessarily see a place to put it in any of those other screens. You can establish an unlimited number of user-defined criteria on the contract as well. So once I've laid out the contract in here, I've attached any documents that I wanted to carry along with it, I've added my billing schedule, my visit schedule, all that stuff, then I can actually prepare the contract form itself. And this will spit out kind of a boilerplate service contract here. And it'll identify the equipment that's covered, the total cost of the contract, when it starts and ends, right there. And as always, kind of a blanket statement about Spectrum whenever I bring up any sort of form, whether it's a report, whether it's in this case a contract to be sent, issued, signed. I also have the opportunity to email this straight out of here. So if there was somebody that I needed to send this to, if I'm going to email that contract to my customer, I can do that from here. Let's just send it to myself. You can set up default email addresses on your customers and sites and have it automatically go to them that way. And let's say maintenance, another spell, agreement. Heather can never type with an audience. There we go. All right, so we can send out the contract that way, and then when they send it back to us, I can store that signed copy in the service contract itself. Okay, so I've got the contract in here. I also have the opportunity to copy contracts. So I'll mention that if you've got, let's say, a handful of contracts that look very similar, that are going to cover a handful of different sites, perhaps all for the same customer, or the configuration is very similar, you have the opportunity to copy a contract. And it will take all of that information, including maybe even the types of equipment that are covered by that particular contract, and copy it to a new one. So that would be the one-off way to generate new contracts. If I just wanted to take an existing, let's say, template maintenance agreement and copy it, I have the opportunity to do that. I also have a renewal management tool. So when it comes time to renew these, I can decide to renew contracts for a given customer for a particular type of service contract. I can run this for a range of expiration dates and generate renewals for anything that's due to expire, let's say, in the next month or so. I can increment my contract price by a particular percentage. So if we're escalating our rates with a new contract year, I can do that. I can also choose, when I'm going through this renewal management process, to establish the new contract as proposed. I can issue the renewals, wait to get the acceptance of the contract, and then we can set them to active once we get those. Same opportunity to honor the proposal for a fixed number of days as well. So if I need to do renewals en masse, if I need to do bulk renewals, let's say at the end of the year, at the end of the quarter, I have tools to do that as well. So we've established the contract here. We've established what equipment is covered or what systems are covered by the contract. We've established the components on those pieces of equipment when we were setting up the site. We've got billings arranged. We have visits scheduled where they're actually going to go out and do the work, perform the tasks. So from here, I have a couple of tools to automate the process of billing these contracts, as well as creating the work tickets or the work orders that are going to be scheduled to the individual technicians who are going to go do the work. So if I use this Create Work Orders tool, and I've just got a bunch of shortcuts because we've got a large menu system filled with all sorts of options, and I find sometimes it's useful to streamline the processes into these groups of shortcuts here in my favorites bar, to just distill it down to just the processes that I actually need to do. So this tool allows me to create work orders off of my scheduled visits on the contract as far in advance as I like. So in this case, I can say, let's go ahead and create work orders. I'm going to run this through the end of the year just to make sure we have some material here, but I can say, go ahead and create my work orders based off of the site visit schedule. Go ahead and assign the requested technician, because you can establish preferred technicians or default technicians at the site level. I can choose to automatically assign that technician, as well as grab the scheduled date of the visit and have that drop onto my dispatch schedule automatically. So in this case, when you're going through and running your work orders or creating your work orders for the scheduled visits, you can have them automatically scheduled for you. So I'll go ahead and create these. It lets me know here are the work orders that you're going to create based off of these contracts for these particular customers. That's a little small, I'm going to guess. And here are the dates when the work is going to be performed. And then this is going to let me know, here are the work order numbers we've assigned to this. So we've got work order numbers assigned for the Charles building, the library, and the other library contract here based off of these schedules. It's attached the preferred technician or the requested technician to these, and it's gone ahead and dropped them onto my dispatch schedule. So that was completed successfully. So I don't have to go through the act of creating each individual work ticket for the contract visits. I also don't need to worry about scheduling those manually the same way that I might with the emergent calls or the off-the-street calls. So there are ways to find the process of getting the work on deck and assigned to the proper technician. Now, the companion tool to creating work orders is running your contract billing. So when it's time to generate the invoices, this allows me to easily, and let's go ahead and run these. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run these out through the end of the year. Well, actually, let's be reasonable here. So I can do this for a set of sites, a particular set of customers, for all, for just one or two. Whoops, it looks like I did that already. So that will generate the actual invoices there based off of the schedules that I've got in my contract. And it looks like in my practicing, I billed everything through the end of the year already. So let's kind of kick this out way into the future. Let's go to anything here. Hooray. All right, so the tool is there. I billed everything, so I don't have anything outstanding, unfortunately. But the contract billing processing would generate invoices that you could send out to your customers here from this side of the table. So I can create the work orders, I can create the billings, and then I can manage, let's say, logging the inbound service requests that aren't coming from a service contract or a maintenance agreement. So I can manage my contracts in here for the work that I know is going to be performed. And then when the phone rings and somebody calls me and they need me to come and fix something that may not be part of a contract, I have a screen called the Service Request tool in here. And this allows me to easily and quickly not only log an inbound service request, so generate a work order off of the customer's request, but it also allows me to see what's going on peripherally at that particular service location or at the site. So if I get a call or an email from, we're going to use that same library example, from somebody at the library, the Seattle library, let's say, I don't necessarily need to know what site specifically I'm looking for, or put another way, I don't need to recall my specific site ID. All I need to give the system is just a little bit of information about the site itself, and it'll find me matches. So I said I'm looking for a particular library, and it found me by typing library, a list of service sites that include library, either in the site ID or the customer. Now, perhaps I have somebody on the phone, and I'm not sure if we've done work for them before, and all I have is their phone number, for example. I could type that in. Maybe I know just a street address. I could type a bit of that in there. I can browse for an entire list of all of my sites and see absolutely everything. So you have the opportunity to search for existing service locations and call them up. So somebody calls me from the library, I find the library, and the service request screen then gives me a whole bunch of information about what's going on peripherally at the Seattle main library. It's going to show me whether or not they have available credit. If you extend credit to your customers, you may want to know if they've exceeded that credit limit, in which case it looks like the Seattle library has certainly blown through their credit limit here. It's going to show me if they owe me money. The collections monitor appears anytime there is a past due AR balance of any aged amount. You also have the opportunity to add a site alert to identify something that might be going on at the site at the point of taking the call. The system will show me if I have service contracts in effect that cover this particular site, as well as if there are materials on order for this site. And then you can leave a note about the customer as well. So you've got an alert about the site specifically, and then about the customer at large. Any of these fields here, if I click on the hyperlink, will take me through to more information. So if I'm curious about what they owe me, or what their credit limit is, for example, as well, I can choose that hyperlink, and it's going to take me into this credit check screen that shows me what do they owe me, how long have they owed, when did they last pay, average days to pay, total balance due. The goal here is to equip the person taking the call with enough information to decide if they want to perhaps apply a little leverage to collect some of that money before deciding to send somebody out to actually do the work. I can actually even email them copies of all of their open invoices by choosing this total balance due link. So this is showing me what's going on in terms of the dollars and cents of this customer. Do they owe me money? Do I want to send somebody out there? Maybe not. I can also see service contracts in here. I have visibility on what maintenance agreements might be active that cover this particular site. And then I can choose to actually assign this work to the contracts if I like as well. If they've called me and this turns out that this work order is actually going to be covered by one of these contracts, I can simply assign that contract to the work order. And now any of the revenue and any of the costs generated from the work performed with this work order is going to be tied back to this particular service contract. I have the opportunity to review materials that I may have ordered that I'm waiting on. So perhaps I don't want to send somebody out there until we have some parts come in, or maybe I just want to know what parts we might have ordered before. I have the opportunity to see purchase orders of different statuses in here and determine what parts we may have used or what parts we may need. I also have visibility on work order history in here. So if I want to see what work has been performed, who did the work, what did they do, what was the status of the particular work order, I have visibility on that in here and the opportunity to open any of these work orders as well and see what's going on. So I've got good visibility on the site history and what we've done. But as long as we're in here as well, if there's something about the customer I would like to call up, I have access on the info bar to a whole bunch of information about this particular customer. I can see things like other sites that may exist for the customer, other contracts that are in effect, quotes or orders that are outstanding for them. So I've got access to information about the customer as well as about the site. And then I could also quickly call up a list of equipment that's there. So if I need to track my site equipment and see what's covered, and if I need to take a look at this particular piece of equipment, call up more details about it, I have the opportunity to see my list of systems or equipment on site while I'm taking the call. So I'm talking a lot about this, but the goal of this screen is that it's a quick turn and burn tool to get your work orders in the system while equipping your dispatchers or your call takers or the folks logging the inbound service request with information about what's going on at the site. So this new work section is what I'm going to complete when I get the phone call or when the email comes in. So this customer request is probably the most important field on here. This is just, what are we sending the technician to do? What's the description of the work? This is a short description of the work. I have the opportunity to really build out the dimensions of this work order and add a lot more text down below. But the customer request is where I can quickly log a description of the work, or I can actually set up a list of common customer requests. If you've got a lot of repetitive type requests, if a lot of the service you do is fairly similar, if a lot of your work looks the same, you have the opportunity to set up these quick request codes and choose those to default to the description in here. So the goal is make it quick and easy to log the inbound service request. So if I type a 107 in here, that's going to pop in that description. Perhaps the customer gives me a PO, I can add that. This other information section here is going to help me with dispatching, as well as allow me to provide a high-level quote to my customer, and they can tell me when they'd prefer to have somebody come out. So I have opportunities to set a dispatch status at the point of taking the call. This list here, totally configured by you. This is a list of statuses or dispatch statuses that make sense to the way you do business. So maybe we're just going to call this one an open work order, and we can also set a priority unique from the dispatch status. So I may say this is a medium priority. And then I can also assign a case type to this work ticket. Now the case type is good for a couple of purposes. Number one, it's a great filtering mechanism for reporting downstream, for deciding which types of work orders you'd like to see in your dispatch schedule, but it also cross-checks against the technician records to determine whether a given technician is perhaps authorized or certified or even the best choice to perform certain types of work. So in this case, maybe I'm going to say security clearance is required to get into this particular library building. And I may have certain technicians who don't have that security clearance. The dispatch schedule will let me know if that's the case, and it will keep me from assigning a work order to somebody who perhaps ought not be sent to do the work. As with everything else here, all of these drop-downs, these are configurable lists. So these are going to be defined by you based on the needs of your operation. And then perhaps while I have the customer on the phone, I tell them I think it's going to cost $500 and I think my technician can get it done in 2 hours. They tell me, great, can you send somebody out tomorrow at 10 in the morning? And then down below, I can get more specific about the work that we're ordering the technician to do. So if the customer request is the quick, short description of the job, down below I can build it out. So I can add more notes about what I'm sending the tech to perform. This is customer facing. So it will print on my work order form, my finished work ticket, and it'll also be visible to the technician out in the field. When we start talking about field data capture and collecting information from the job site. So it will, this information is going to be customer facing. Okay, so at this point, again, while a fair bit of talking from me here in terms of getting the information in here, the goal is that I land in the service request screen, I call up a site, I add a quick bit of description here, I assign a priority, add some notes, and then I can click create work order, and that will generate the new work order off of this service request screen. To backtrack just a little bit, I chose an existing site where I've performed work before, and it's going to open up the work order that it's just created for me. But I can also add a new site on the fly as well. So back in the service request tool, we'll backtrack a bit here. I do have the opportunity to set up a new site and, in fact, even a new customer on the fly at the point of taking the phone call. To talk a little bit about workflow and sometimes internal controls and who's allowed to do what, you could allow somebody taking a call to create a new site, but you might require somebody else's approval, let's say before that new customer was available for use. Our workflow tools allow you to craft your own really internal review processes around the creation of important control type records, so that if somebody is setting up a new site or a new customer, you may have somebody else downstream that needs to approve that. So creation of new sites in here is meant to be quick and easy, but you can also establish workflows to basically to create internal controls around that process. So new site option, and this is going to allow me to add a site code, a name and address, to identify the type of work we're doing there, to set up a new customer, establish credit limit, material levels, all that good stuff. And then I have access to the same new work screen where I can add the customer description or the request and build out the description of the work. There are also options. I'll mention options in terms of, do I want to assign a work order number myself, or would I like the system to do that? Do I want to open up each work order after I create it, or is that not important to me? Those are all options you can set when you're getting the system in place. So in this case, I'm going to take us back to the work order we've just created. I've told the system, every time I create a new one, go ahead and open it up for me, because I want to spot check this work order. I want to make sure everything looks good. I may want to attach documents. I may want to add additional notes. Maybe there's something that needs to be changed. Perhaps, while in general the Seattle library likes to be billed on a T&M basis, perhaps we're going to bill them on a flat rate here in this case. Those are tools available just by opening up the work order. Again, we've got the document imaging in here, and to frame this up from a field to office and office to field workflow perspective, this document imaging window here is really bi-directional. So I can add documents, and let's add something, let's add a photo. I can add documents here, and my technician, when they call up this work order using our field tech kiosk tools or the field tools, will be able to see this particular image in this case here. They'll also be able to snap pictures of the work they've performed or attach documents of their own, and those will flow into this document imaging panel as well. When they wrap up work at a site, they conclude the job, they can capture a customer signature and get a signature on the finished work ticket. That finished work order form is going to be stored in document imaging here as well. So I can send information to the field. I can send documents to the field that they will be able to access. I can also review documents that have been added from the field. So information flows both ways, back and forth from office to job site. So it's a good way to share communication, to be able to store documents that both parties need access to. I can review it here in the office, and the tech can get it out in the field, say from a tablet. All right, so in this case, basic high-level information about the work order. Is there a customer PO? Is phone information, contact note, customer information here? All of this we reviewed in the service request screen. Billing setup. Sometimes I like to eyeball billing setup just to make sure that if there's things like tax flags, whether or not this is taxable, that I want to change or reinforce, I can check that out in here. If I'm going to send the bill somewhere else, you can even establish an override to your general company-wide earned revenue markup percentage for your work orders here. I can override or change rate levels for material and labor. For the most part, I bring us in here just to show what is captured on the work order. There's no activity on here yet. I don't have any labor, any materials. I haven't necessarily issued any purchase orders yet, but I've got the work order in place. Now, I actually will mention, speaking of purchasing, that we also have a two-directional sort of tool here as well for assisting with generating purchase orders or requesting PO numbers. Maybe in the office I've identified that there's some parts I already know I'm going to need to order for this particular work order. I can create a new PO on the fly right from within this work order. And that's going to be visible from the field should they open this particular work order up and need to identify whether or not the parts have been ordered. Flip side of that, from the field, the technician has the ability to request the purchase order number, add some notes about what they bought or need to buy, and that's going to flow back in here as well. So another two-directional tool that allows you to communicate information to the field and for them to communicate information back to us. So from here, I've created my work order. There's not a lot of information in it other than a short description that there is a malfunctioning chiller, it would appear. And the next step here would be for me to assign this to a particular technician. And I can do that using several different flavors of dispatching. The first place I'm going to take us is into the dispatch schedule. And this is more of a calendar-based view of what my technicians are going to do. This rollover screen here allows me to take unfinished work from the day before and drop it onto the dispatch board for today. So in this case, what builds up is a list of my technicians running right down the middle of the screen with their assignments running left to right. And in this box, I've got my unassigned work orders, so my unscheduled work. Now, end of the day, the way that I actually assign these to a particular technician is simply to drag and drop. So I can take a work order, choose a technician, and drop it off. And now that work is assigned to Matt Dunlap here. So drag and drop opportunities to schedule. And I have chosen to zoom this board to show minutes, as in each segment of the schedule here is 10 minutes of the hour. You can choose to zoom this out and say, I don't need that much space occupied by each, I just need a segment of the day to be, a segment of the board to be each hour of the day. What I can also do is decide to zoom to days. Perhaps your work takes a matter of days to complete and you want to see instead what's going on Tuesday or Thursday or Friday or Monday. So I can zoom it that way. I'm going to go back to the hours view. I like that one. And then to help manage both my scheduled calls or my maintenance agreement calls, my service contract visits, to keep those separate from my emergent stuff or my ad hoc or my calls that came in on the fly, I have options in the selections button up here that change what I see in the dispatch board. So perhaps I want to see absolutely everything we have on deck for all of my technicians, all type of work. I can show all work orders. That's what I've chosen to do. But there's also a lot of toggles and a lot of selections that I can make in here that can give me different views of the same dispatch schedule. So perhaps I only want to see my maintenance visits, or those visits that were generated off of my contract agreement. I can choose to see maintenance visits only. Or I could choose to exclude those and say, don't show me all the stuff that's already on the schedule. Just show me the work orders that are that came in on the flyer, that came in from the phone call. So I can see everything, or I can isolate out just the maintenance visits. And I can also decide which types of work orders do I want to see on here. I might create a version of the board that is only my highest priority or only my emergency calls, so that I can see who's been assigned the emergency stuff for the most urgent statuses. I could set up a version of the board that was for a single customer, a single site. I could decide that I only wanted a particular status or a particular geographic region on here. I can also decide if I want to include weekends. If you do your work on weekends, you might not want to hide Saturdays and Sundays. And you can decide what your default start and end work time is for the day as well. What is the earliest hour you want on the board for the day? I can decide to display information based on the name of the site or the work order number. I can include all of my techs or maybe just certain technicians. And then I can also decide, once I've selected what I want to see in these lists, I can decide how to group or sort my unscheduled work. So perhaps I want to group this by zone or region. I can choose to group or sort the work by a geographic territory and do my dispatching that way. And then maybe if I like this configuration, if I want this available to me in the future, I can choose to save this, and let's say by geography. I hate typos, man. Okay. And then I can use this template as my default. So I can say every time I come into the dispatch schedule, show this to me based on geographic territory or based on zone. You can also make this available to other folks if you've got multiple people managing your dispatching. If you have a handful of people making the assignments, they can share these different configurations. You can set up different versions of the board, really even for different dispatchers, so they can see things differently. You might set up a group that's instead classified more by priority or the status of the call, and then I can choose to dispatch my highest priority calls first. And again, I do that just by dragging and dropping onto the proper technician here. If I've got multiple people who are going to be working on the same work order, I can assign this to multiple technicians. I can do that just by using my control key and saying, hey, let's drag this one up to this individual as well. I won't do that because they'd be busy there, but I can schedule multiple technicians. I can, by right-clicking here, I can choose to email my technician and let them know, hey, you've got a new work order assigned. But also, when you're using our field tech kiosk or the technician portal tool for capturing information from the field, they're going to have a dashboard that is constantly refreshing in the background, showing them their new assignments in real time. So as I assign something to them, they're only ever 60 seconds really from knowing they've got a new work engagement. I can also change the status and the priority of the call once it's already assigned or once it's in the board as well. Change this to a high priority instead. Now, once I've chosen a work order, whether from the scheduled side of things or from the unscheduled side, as soon as I choose a work order, Spectrum looks to see whether or not they owe me money. And this collections monitor appears anytime there is a past due balance. If they're not past due, this won't show up. As soon as they owe me money, I get this collections monitor alert at the top of the screen showing me that there is a past due balance and they owe me some cash. And I can use this to get into my customer information from here as well and call up financial summary of what they owe me. And again, I can use this balance due link to send invoices right from within the screen. One of the nice things about Spectrum's tabbed structure in terms of navigation is that I can be in multiple places at the same time. So while I'm in the dispatch schedule right now, I can still have my service request screen open over here. I can even split the screen in half if I wanted and be looking at both of these at once. I can toggle back to a customer financial summary. I even still have a list of service contracts open if I wanted to go review those. So because we allow you to be in multiple tabs at the same time, functionally performing multiple tasks simultaneously, I never need to fire up another session or log in again. I can simply have these tabs across the top that allow me to bounce back and forth between what I'm doing or what I'm managing. So let's recap here what we've done so far. A couple of ways to generate work orders. One of them would be from creating a service contract with a visit schedule and running our work order processing routine to create those. Those can land on the dispatch board or schedule automatically based on the technician and the date of the visit. Then we used our service request screen to generate an ad hoc or an emergent call that needed attention that wasn't part of a maintenance agreement. This here is one flavor of dispatching where I'm able to assign particular work orders to particular technicians. I can also change the amount of time that this eats up on the board here as well. And if I want to drill in and see what else this technician has assigned, I can do that. If I want a little bit more info about the particular technician, I can get into that in here. This is just allowing me to drill back and see more details about this particular technician's assignments. I can change the amount of space that these eat up or how long it's going to take just by grabbing a particular work order and resizing it on here. So maybe I want to free up some time and I know this one isn't going to take as long and he's going to begin it earlier. I can rearrange this on the board or reassign it to somebody else altogether just by dragging it around on the schedule. And again, I can notify my technician if I want to from here. So I mentioned we have a few flavors of dispatching. This is more calendar-based. We call this the dispatch schedule. I'm going to go to my sitemap here for a second. But if it's the dispatch board that I'm interested in, if I prefer more of a magnets on the wall style of dispatching, I have a board which works similarly, but instead of giving me the schedule for the day, simply shows me my technicians and everything they've got assigned to them. So just more of a list of, hey, here's everything they have to do. We're less concerned with the time of day they're going to do it. We care less about specifically when and just more, workload. Who's got the most going on? Who has space for more stuff? And scheduling works similarly in here in terms of making the assignment. I can choose a work order from the board, and then I grab a technician, click their name, and pull it up here. And that assigns that particular work order to that tech. And then I could go on to the next one. I could say, Edwin's going to do this next one. I drag that up in there, and that makes the assignment. I still get visibility on the collections monitor. I'm able to see a short description of the work that's being performed or what I'm sending them to do as I'm making the assignment. I can still have a whole bunch of different configurations of this board that show me different technicians, different types of work orders, all the same criteria there. But if you prefer more of a list instead of a Gantt-style scheduler, this allows me to just grab, drag, and drop. And that adds the work order to the technician. So those are a couple different types of scheduling. At this point, I think it makes sense to change roles a little bit here. All of this work up to this point is performed more by, shall we say, the office side of the house. But now we've created the work orders, we've dispatched them to particular technicians. It probably makes sense to take a look at what we can capture from the field, how we can grab labor from the field, we can add materials to the work orders, add notes, photos, capture customer signatures, and all of that from, say, a tablet out on the job site. So in this case, I'm going to sign out as what we'll call the office. And now we'll imagine that this login is happening from, say, an iPad. But I am going to sign in using a technician's credentials, and we'll see the world from a technician standpoint. So if I log in as a field tech in this case, I'm going to get a dashboard that shows me what I need to go do. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. So what this is going to show me here when this pulls up is a list of my work assignments. It's also going to show me work orders that are maybe not necessarily open or current, but which I've still got on my schedule here. It's going to show me as well time that I've spent doing service type tasks, and it's going to show me if you have truck-specific inventories, what sort of materials I've got in my truck, and then additionally, if there are things I may need to restock. So I've got a list of my assignments. I've got calls that are maybe finished but not closed or billed, but that I may want visibility on these for maybe the rest of the day until the office invoices them. I may want to see more or less a time card for the week. What have I done so far? What time is in here for work orders waiting to be paid out? And then just what do I have driving around with me? You can actually establish unique inventory, I'll put it in air quotes, warehouses that get associated with a technician and represent their truck stock. So you can stock each van with its respective materials, assign that to a technician, and then they get dashboard visibility on what they have on their vehicle and what they need. So the way that this works, the intent is that they're accessing this from a mobile device. I'm going to just use colloquially an iPad as the example. They have an iPad, they sign in to the system as a technician. It's going to give them their list of work. I'll also just mention, from a licensing standpoint, that this particular tool, this field technician kiosk, actually allows an unlimited number of technicians access to the system without ever consuming one of your Spectrum user licenses. So I have access to, all of my technicians can have access to the system without ever consuming a license. So I'm going to choose, what am I going to choose? I'm going to choose one of these work orders here. We'll open this up. And to quickly go through some of the information we can capture from the field, when I first open this up, I'm going to see what it is I've been sent to do, where I'm being sent to do it. I can see a little bit more information about the customer, whether or not there's a service contract that covers this particular work. And as soon as I either hit the road or arrive on site, I can clock in. If you choose, I can change the status. This is going to speak back to the dispatch schedule and let the dispatchers know the tech has arrived. I can also see images that have been added to this particular work order. So if there's stuff that the office passed across to me, I'm able to open that up. But also if I'm on a device with a camera, and we'll use the example of an iPad, I'm able to fire up the camera, add pictures straight into this particular work order. So I'm going to actually browse and do this manually, but if there were a picture that I took of the work that I'm doing, if I'm on a device with the camera, it'll let me just snap a picture and upload that straight in here. Or I can choose from my photo library and add pictures here. So I can add photos that I take. I can review documents that were sent by the office. And actually, I'll back up on this a little bit too. The act of clocking in here started the clock ticking for two purposes. Number one, for billing. Let's say this was a T&M, a time and material work order. It would start the clock ticking for billing. But what it would also do is start the clock ticking for payroll. So by clocking in, this is a way to collect labor hours from the field in real time. These will be funneled straight into payroll. The act of capturing my time by clocking into a work order is generating the labor entries. So I'm not needing to, let's say, rekey anything that comes in on a piece of paper from out in the field. Instead, the technician clocks in and I'm automatically capturing their labor hours, both for paying and for billing. So some other stuff on here. If I need to know where I'm going, I've got access to a map. I can see the site address and I can get myself there. I can also review notes and add my own. So I can see what was I sent to do. There can be additional notes, internal notes, things I may need to know maybe for accessing the site. And then I can add my notes about what it is that I've done. And this can either be work that I've completed that I choose to type. So add notes about what I did. Or if I've got voice recognition on my tablet, for example, I can add notes that way. You may want to capture internal notes, things that you don't necessarily want printing on the finished work order forms that you want to capture internally for review. You can set up topics of that nature. You have an unlimited number of note topics that you can establish and information you can capture in here. It will spell check for you, so the technician can see if they misspelled something before they hand over, let's say, the finished work order for the customer to sign off on. And also, if this is coming from a maintenance agreement where we've got a handful of tasks and particular part notes, things that need to be completed, tasks for the individual systems or pieces of equipment, those would display in here as well. And then in the labor arena, maybe I'm working alongside somebody. I'm able to add time for additional technicians. So if you work in teams or crews even, the lead or the individual with the tablet could add time for associates. Or you could have multiple technicians clocked into the same work order and all adding their time as well. So I can add time in here. I can modify time up until payroll takes over and grabs it and pulls it in to be paid. I can add labor hours on the fly for another technician, let's say, who was working with me. If I was working alongside Andre, I can add hours for him, both for billing and for payroll. Hours worked is what would be paid to the technician. Billing hours is what the customer would see. So I can add labor here. I can adjust labor. In the materials section, I'm able to search for items on my truck and add those to the work order. Easy text searching. So the technician doesn't need to know the specific part number. They can simply say, I'm looking for some connectors or some EMT, and it's going to pull up a list of what is stocked on my truck. So here's what I used. I can add that and specify how many. And then I can also proceed with non-stock items, maybe customer supplied parts, as well as choosing to add stuff from the main warehouse if I grab some parts before I hit the road. Other charges may be things that the office defaulted in here. Maybe you have trip charges for sites that are particularly distant. Maybe you've got other types of things that we need to add to the work order here that are not inventory items, but we need to charge the customer for. That lives in here. User-defined arena for information that you need to capture, but again, that we didn't see a place to put in other fields here. These can have validated responses that the technician can plug in, choose a proper response here, add it to the work order. And then I also have the opportunity to create or request purchase orders from the field. So if there's a part that I need, or if I stop by the supply house and bought some parts, I can request a purchase order number. And this PO can go through an internal approval process where somebody in procurement or purchasing might review it and make sure everything's A-okay. And I can say I went to Home Depot and I bought some parts. Bought, used, spent $24. I can specify it's for this work order or if I'm restocking my vehicle. So this might be either things that I bought or something that I need for this work order. And by saying, okay, this generates a purchase order number ties it back to this work order, and allows this PO to go through a workflow to approve my purchase request, essentially. It assigns a PO number for my purchase, assigns it to the work order, and then somebody back in the office is probably going to want to take a look at that. I can see a list of equipment on site here as well, and I can see if it's covered by a contract or a maintenance agreement. And then I can also see a service history. So I can see what else has been done and who did it and when. I can open up the work order if I want. And then if I need to generate a new work order, say additional work, or maybe I'm an after-hours technician and I need to create new work orders as those calls come in, I can create new work orders for this site here as well. So when I'm done, and I'm going through this pretty quickly in the interest of time, but when I'm done, I can clock out, which stops the clock both for payroll and for billing, and then I can generate the finished work order form, and I can present this on my tablet to the customer to review and to sign off on. So they can eyeball this, make sure everything looks good here, and then I can capture a signature. So I can do this right from my tablet. We'll have them sign off on it. Would you believe I did that with the mouse? I can say, email the signed document to the customer. This will send them their own copy of the signed finished work order form. Defaults in their email address. You can add a nice friendly note here. Off it goes. And then what also happens is that signed finished work order form is going to be stored back in the office. So I'm done here now. At this point now I've got one less open work order. It's dropped down here to my finished. I'm going to see some time captured in here as well. I've got 15 minutes or so on today's work order, so that's all done. And now back in the office, I'm able to review the information that came in from the field, and I'm able to bill it. So back in the office, I may call up maybe every work order that was finished today, or I might spot check them one at a time. There's a variety of tools for how you bill these emergent work orders or the stuff that didn't come from a contract. I can certainly just choose to call up each work order on its own, eyeball it, and bill it. I'll just call up that one we just worked with. And so in here, I'm going to be able to see, when did the technician arrive, when did they leave, when did they finish. I'll be able to see their labor and their material, all of the items that got added from the field here. I'll be able to see their labor. And then ultimately, I can come through to this financial screen and get a snapshot of the work that was done. And I'm able to see costs, I'm able to see what I'll bill, and then I get profitability as well. So this gives me a financial snapshot of the work order, of the labor, the material, other type charges, invoice total, and allows me to bill with one click from here. So the information was all captured from the field. It's stored in the work order in real time. I'm able to complete this all at once, preview the invoice, email it to the customer, and the work is done. Now I'll mention also, I probably meant to do this when we were looking at the Field Tech kiosk there, but I mentioned our partnership with Field Connect. That is another resource for collecting information, for performing a lot of similar type tasks, collecting information from the field, but with even more robust forms options, with great opportunities to go offline if your technicians are, say, in dead zones and need to capture information where there is no connectivity. So it's a partnership that allows additional resources from the field. It's another tool. If our field technician kiosk that we just looked at doesn't look like it quite gets you there, then we're happy to be able to talk about Field Connect solutions as well as providing a customer portal and some other options. So this is my work order here. I'm actually going to choose the work order version of this. And there's our invoice. So now we've taken that from generating the call, performing the work, ultimately billing it here. So that's really the complete workflow of start to finish work order management, both from the contract generation side, managing your equipment or your systems on site, creating the visits, scheduling the visits, and now ultimately closing out the call, doing the work, bringing it back home. And actually, if I were to come back to this financial summary, we'd be able to see I billed this. So that is really, we're at time here. So I really appreciate you joining us. I hope you saw some useful stuff there in terms of streamlining your service operations with Spectrum Service Management. Have a terrific day, and bye, guys. Thanks.